In car audio, just like any other hobby, there's a large selection of gear from entry level to high end. But the year is now 2020. Speakers and subwoofers have been around forever, and there's been a lot of technological advancement. What is entry level gear like today from a reputable manufacturer? More specifically, what type of performance can we get from everyone's favorite car audio upgrade? Adding a subwoofer. Well, my friends, in this project, the entry-level subwoofer install project, we are gonna find out. In this video, we're going to build this ported subwoofer box. We're going to talk about the design features, learn core build techniques, wrap with upholstery, and we're going to do a test listen. I'm Mark, welcome to CarAudioFabrication. Let's design, build, and install. The gear behind the entry-level subwoofer upgrade project is going to be these 4 different pieces. We of course have the subwoofer, we have an amplifier, we have a subwoofer grill in order to protect the subwoofer in the box, and then we have a subwoofer volume control knob for the amplifier. We'll talk about the amplifier and the other gear when we do the install and do a test listen, but for the subwoofer box project here, we're going to focus on this JL Audio 12W1 V3. There's quite a few unique design features on this subwoofer. One of them is that it has this removable trim ring that we can use for attaching our speaker grill. We could also paint this to be like an accent color as part of the build if we wanted to. This has the push style terminals for connecting our wiring. This also has JL Audio's elevated frame cooling, which you'll notice what is unique here is there's no pole vent in the back of the magnet. And that's nice because if we wanted to use this subwoofer in an application like a sealed box where it needed to be really close to a back wall because there was limited amount of space, we could do so without worrying about having to space the back of the box off the sub. It could literally be right up against here. And the same goes for a ported application as well. But overall, the reason I picked this subwoofer is because it is entry level, very affordable. We don't need to have a huge amplifier that's going to tax the electrical system on our vehicle. We're actually going to power this up with only 250 watts RMS. The goal here being that we can have a pretty awesome sounding system with some substantial output at the entry level. So we know what gear we want to use. What about our plan for what we're actually going to build? You guys know that here on the channel, I always stress that the key to getting a great sounding system is careful planning. And as part of that planning, I've come up with an enclosure design here that we're going to use for this subwoofer. If you guys are interested and need help with a subwoofer box design, I'd love to help you. Check out my website at CarAudioFabrication.com. For our plan here, we're going with a slot ported style enclosure. And for those of you that might be new to car audio, you can't just cut a hole in the outside of the box. The cross-sectional area and the length and the internal volume of the air chamber, those all correlate together in order to get a specified tuning so that we can optimize the actual performance and output of this sub. When I was designing this box, I did do some calculations and I plugged in JL Audio's recommendation of 1.6 cubic feet of airspace tuned to approximately 32 hertz. And when I looked at the response, I found that this will give us some nice low-end extension along with giving us an even overall response. So this isn't just going to be a one-note box. It should play a wide variety of music and sound awesome. We'll be going with what's called a double baffle, meaning that we're going to have 2 layers for the surface here that the subwoofer actually attaches to add a little bit of extra strength. And we're also going to have some bracing inside here for added strength. We're going to have some corner 45s to strengthen up those corners, some port end bracing, and then although it's not shown here on the design, we're also going to be doing some cool insert work to give this box a little bit of customization. So as part of this design, I know that this is going to be 30 wide by 15 tall and 13 deep, but I also have the dimensions for each and every board and detailed hole that I need to cut. Let's get to work. So I've cut the two front pieces, the back piece, the top and bottom. I've got ports 1 and 2. I have the bracing, I have the side pieces, and then I have all my 45s and my port end bracing. So now I can move on to doing the detail work, and that's going to be cutting some of the holes in the two front pieces along with making this bracing. I start this part of the process with measuring out where the center point needs to be for the circular cutout of the sub. This is a cool low-budget trick for drawing a perfect circle without the use of expensive tools. I've taken a scrap piece of cardboard from a cereal box and I've measured out the radius, which is half of the overall diameter of my cutout. I used a push pin to poke a hole that I can get a mechanical pencil lead through, and the other end I actually put the push pin through in order to rotate it around and draw this circle. I now need to mark out my port, and each of the sides of the port is 3/4 of an inch away from the edge of the baffle, so to do that I just use a 3/4 inch thick piece of wood to draw each of those lines. With these holes marked out, I could then use a jigsaw to obviously cut everything out, but I want to take this to the next level. I want my cuts to be perfect, and I want to add a cool design on the front here, so I started laying out some templates. So the goal here is to basically have a wing kind of shape on each side of the box that I can add some accent to. And since the box will be wrapped with carpet, I can then accent those pieces there with some gray vinyl just to give this a little bit more of a unique look. Now this may seem complex, but it's nothing too crazy. I'm going to be using this main shape here to make those insert pieces, and then I'll cut off each end by using a circle that matches that inside cut for the flush mounting of the subwoofer. And then since this piece will be my male shape, I need to somehow have a way to cut into this baffle board here to make the female clearance so that that piece can sit down in. So to do that, I'll just use the next template size up. These template shapes are from Mobile Solutions, and the most complex part here is that I want to make sure that I have a perfect clearance between the male and female shapes. That way I can account for the actual upholstery materials that I'm going to wrap these pieces with. And in order to determine that clearance, I'm using my new tool that I've designed here, the CarAudioFabrication Material Gap Gauge. I'll put a link to the video up in the corner where I explain how this is used. But in this case, I need to use a number 3 transition, which is 3/32 of an inch. Since this gap from the factory is 3/16 of an inch, basically I need to oversize one of these sides by 3/32 of an inch to shrink that gap. In order to use these templates along with the router, I first need to do what is called rough cutting, where I use a jigsaw and I basically cut up close to the line but not all the way on the line. Next, I'm applying double-sided template tape, which allows me to stick these templates to the work surface before I transfer them over to the router. Over at the router, I'm using this bit here. This is just a standard flush trim bit. What it does is it rides that bearing against the top, which is the template, and it transfers that profile, making a perfect cut to our wood piece on the bottom. So anytime I need to use a template, I repeat this process of peel, stick, and then make the cut. Using this process gives us very, very clean cuts, as you can see in this close-up, and you can see that my subwoofer fits perfectly. So that's the first baffle done. Now I need to make that second flush mount baffle that's going to flush mount the subwoofer in, and it's going to have a little bit more of a complicated geometry to give this box a cool look. So here I am rough cutting that out and then applying my templates here, and once again proceeding with making cutting passes, this time 2 different cutting passes, one for cutting the circular cutout around the subwoofer and then the other one for cutting that cool beauty panel geometry. When making those cutting passes, I used this oversized bearing, and again, that's just so that I could shrink the gap down between the male and female pieces. For making that male inside piece, I cut the overall shape, and then I used that smaller circle template that fits inside of the female shape in order to cut each of the end pieces. Next, I turned my attention to making the inside braces, which is a similar process of rough cutting, laying out some templates, and then doing the flush trimming on the router. I feel like honestly I could do a whole video all about making braces. Let me know if that's something you would like to see. Now that all the holes are added to the pieces that required it and we did some shaping here, this is really starting to come together, but I do have some detail work I need to do, and we're going to use 3 different main router bits: a chamfer bit, a roundover bit, and a rabbiting bit. The chamfer bit will be used to add some accent and bring this surface down to match this surface, since this board here is a little bit thinner than this board. So I'll be doing that around this perimeter. I'll be using a round over bit around the opening of the port here to allow air to more evenly flow in and out. I'll also be using it on this corner of the piece of wood, as well as this corner and this corner, again, so that the air can wrap around the port effectively. And I'll also use the round over bit on my bracing pieces here just to soften up that corner. I'll use a much smaller version of a round over bit to add a little bit of a soft edge to this inside piece here. And then finally, with the rabbiting bit, I'll use that on the sides of the box in order to give myself some clearance that I can tuck the carpet into when we get further along in this project and do the upholstery. The most advanced detail work, though, was adding these 3 grooves onto each of the side pieces. To do this, I basically made 2 different rails that I could then slide this piece back and forth against. I then added a stopper piece so that this assembly could only go so far. I then stuck the insert pieces against this group of parts and then made a cutting pass using what's called a bull nose bit. I feel like this is a pretty cool use of some scrap pieces of wood to make some geometry that would otherwise require an expensive CNC or other tools. To finalize these parts, I used another rabbiting bit on the back side. You can see it cuts this groove here, and that will come in handy when I go to wrap these with the upholstery vinyl. One more quick hole that we will use for our speaker terminal in order to add the speaker wire into the box, and now we have a nice big pile of parts that's looking, if I dare say it myself, mighty clean. With all of our pieces cut, we can now move on to the assembly process. We're going to be using some wood glue, and in this case, we're going to be using a brad nailer to hold the box together while the glue dries. I absolutely love this stage of the project when it's in its raw woodworking form. Looks super cool. I really like the way that these inserts turned out. I think they're gonna look really cool once we wrap them with vinyl and wrap this with carpet, which is the next step doing our upholstery. Now, before we get into the upholstery, I do need to do a little bit of prep work. I do need to paint around here with just some flat black paint. That way we won't see any of the raw wood in that small, tiny little gap between the carpet and the subwoofer. And I also do need to paint the port. Easy enough to do. I'm just gonna hit it with the old rattle can, and then we can move on to the upholstery. The best way to set yourself up for success when doing your upholstery is proper preparation. So first of all, I make sure that I have all my tools right here ready to go. I have a pry tool here that I can use to push the carpet and vinyl into corners when I need to. I have a smaller version of that if needed. I have a sharp blade with a brand new knife. I really like using these Olfa knives. I have scissors just in case I need to make a larger cut. I have a straight edge for making the seam on the bottom of the box. And I have my upholstery materials pre-cut. I've cut the vinyl so that I know I have a large enough chunk. And in order to cut the carpet, what I did is I measured this dimension plus this dimension plus this dimension plus this dimension. That sum is what I used to add up the length of this because it's just going to wrap around the enclosure. This way I don't have a bunch of extra carpet sitting around and getting in the way. And then obviously the width of the box, I just added a couple of inches on each side. I've prepped the front of the enclosure by adding masking tape in areas that I don't want the upholstery adhesive to get on. And I've got my spray gun prepped, ready to go. I'm using a special upholstery adhesive. I only ever recommend this adhesive. I'll put a link up in the corner of the screen so you can see the video focused on that. Using upholstery contact adhesive is pretty self-explanatory with a couple of key things that you need to know. First, the adhesive needs to be applied to each surface. So in other words, both the wood and the carpet, and you want to allow it to fully dry before you stick the two together. Once it is dry to the touch, you're going to push the carpet up against the wood, but realize that the second you apply pressure, it's going to be permanently locked in place. So you want to use care and make sure that you don't have any wrinkles. Other than that, just take your time during this process, tuck any extra material into corners and cut it away when you can. But otherwise, I'll let you guys keep on watching me wrap things up. Get it? And here it is, my friends. Check it out. I love how this box turned out. I love these inserts. Look how perfect our gap transition is there. It looks super nice, even going from the vinyl to the carpet. This carpet is a little bit different than what I usually use. It's like this really light heather gray, but I like how it accents together. It looks good. You can see around the port here why we went extra deep with the roundover bit to add that edge so that we could perfectly cut this carpet. Our carpet transition looks awesome on the side of the box here using that rabbited groove technique. Got the grill on the subwoofer here, so it's nice and protected once in the vehicle, but none of that matters if it doesn't sound good. So we're just here in the shop right now, but we've got the amplifier hooked up. We've got it hooked up to my little stereo system that I just built in a recent project, and we're gonna do a test listen. So check this out, the system is over there playing at moderate volume and it's rattling, it's literally rattling this over here. I don't know if you can hear this. Let's see what we can do with some more bass electronic. I'm standing on the other outside the shop now, and the bass is awesome. I can't wait to see what it's like once it's in a smaller environment in a car. Now, something that's often requested for an entry-level bass build is people want to be able to easily remove the subwoofer box and amplifier, take the whole system out of the vehicle if they need to, in order to have a little bit more space in the vehicle. And in order to do that the right way, you need some special things like these quick disconnect plugs for our power cables. We also need some quick disconnect abilities for our RCA connections. There's a couple of other tips and tricks too, and I asked you guys on Instagram if that's something that you would like to see, where basically I mount this on the box so that the whole system can be easily removed, and you guys overwhelmingly said yes, so we're going to be focusing on that next. So my friends, if you'd like to see that video, a review of the amplifier and how this performs once we put it in a car, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. It turns out only about 30% of you guys watching this video are subscribed. It really does help out the channel, and I have a goal of getting to 500,000 subscribers this year, so any help is appreciated. A special thanks to Lonnie Ali, William, Marcos, and Jerry, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.